it would appear that my stream died. Not 100% sure why. So, also my webcam just died too, so I'm gonna have to make some changes here. We won't have the Snapchat filters for the time being because I think that's what's causing it. So give me a second so I can get my webcam back up and running here. What the fuck? Why is it in that configuration? There we go. Okay, so yeah, stream died. Not fun. I will get us back up and running here in a second. My God. Why that actually happened is a complete mystery to me. And it seems that Unreal Engine's actually a little freaked out right now by the whole thing. In fact, Unreal Engine just crashed again. So I'm gonna restart it and see what is up, because I'm not actually using that much RAM. I might have some things that are running in the background that are killing it. No, we should be good to start it back up. So let's go ahead and do that. Whew. I wanted to show that the inventory system was working, but it did not appear to actually. When it crashed like that, that was very unfortunate. So let's go ahead and load up our login screen here, and let's get started again. Nice, me too. Not actually yet, but I wish, right? Alright. Let's try this one more time. Let's see if we can get it to work. If it breaks again, then... Alright, don't crash on me. It's crashing on me, boys. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I made some code changes, and it doesn't seem to actually be updating my inventory anymore, which is unfortunate, because that's what I really want to show off that was working. And then redesign it entirely, so... Where's Hans? Yeah, that's a great question. This is about as close as I could get to him right now. You know what? I'm going to log into one of my other characters here, and we'll do it like that. So this guy has some stuff in his inventory that's working, and he's got a helmet on. So let's go ahead and show how this works here. We'll equip our shields. Boom, that's working. Equip our armor, or our sword, that's working. Our boots. Nice. And we've got 150k gold here. So this isn't exactly Hans, but just to demonstrate the combat is all kind of... It uses collision models to... So if I'm not actually next to him when I attack, it won't actually... You know, it's not like RuneScape's click and point system. But that's how the armory and the inventory updates kind of... I had to make some changes to it because the way I was doing about it... Have I messed with magic yet? Not yet. I have not. So the way I had gone about this originally was to update it to the database every single time that I open these, which causes a lot of lag on the player side. Something you don't want. I realize I'm using a ton of RuneScape's assets for this, but, well, not really. I'm only using their music. Everything else is Unreal Engine or built by myself. This is Lumbridge Castle. And you can see, actually, that this has started to update the armory a little bit. It didn't register, for example, that I have the sword. But it did register that the shield is there. We're going to build this... Did I just take a RuneScape coding and use it, or make maps on your own? Well, RuneScape's coding is private, so no, I did not just take it and steal it. This is all built by myself. As a matter of fact, it doesn't actually. See, let's see if it updates with the sword now that I clicked on it this time. This isn't even the full Lumbridge map. This is as close as I can get. I have some shader issues that are in there, but uh oh. Please refrain from using foul language. I gotta turn it off, that stream bot. Anyway, so I showed you guys that. So I want to make this a tutorial series. So sorry for it censoring you. I turned that on for Valorant when I was playing because. Sorry. So, Cabbage, I can't actually see what it is. I've had this happen with a couple of people where they say something. I can't actually see what the issue is. It doesn't show like the auto moderator. Maybe I can look and see. Give me a second here. No, I can't. Yeah, I might be able to. Let's look. So there might be something with the bot that shows me. Word protection is on. I'm trying to think if there's any blacklisted word. No, there's not. Might be something in the default blacklist. You know what? I'm just gonna turn it off for now. It still does some link protection to prevent spam, but here, let's try that. Oh, great cat. I turned off all of the protections. I don't know how long it takes to update. Anyways, let's go over the tutorial part of this. So I'm using a MySQL database, which I'm sure AAA developers will tell you is not the best way to go about making an MMORPG. But if you're by yourself and you don't have the advanced tool sets that these big companies have, it can serve in a pinch if you actually wanted to make an MMO. I know a lot of private servers are based off of MySQL databases to collect and store their data. So I'm going to go into my scripts folder here and show you guys exactly how all of this works, from the login system down to handling things in game. So let's start with the login system, and I'll show you how I built this all out. So we'll start in our login game mode, and this has two functions. The way this works is I'm using a custom MySQL plugin. You can use HTTPS or JSON requests to do this, but I figured that the plugin was easier for me to use than trying to figure out how to parse all of that stuff. And the plugin just runs natively in the background too. So it's an Unreal Engine plugin. I think I paid like $20 for it a long time ago, and now I've just started finding a use for it. So how this works is basically I'm sending my players to a lobby server for the login, and from there, because I want everything to be executed server side, I never want the player to actually send a MySQL request. The server does all of that work. So for all of this essentially, basically if you're the player, it creates a widget, a login widget, for you to use and sets the input to just using that so that your camera doesn't move around. If you're the server, it sets up all the connection properties and runs through all of that until it's connected. Then we have a couple of custom commands here. Server create account, which takes the username and password from our widget, which I'll show you over here. So for example, on a register widget, we have a custom text box, choose name and password. And when you click on the register, it takes what's in that text box and runs the server create account. And that's run server side only. Creates your account and then logs you in. You can see the queries I'm using. It's just inserting into data to create the account, and we do some sanitizing so that we're not inserting any bad data and that we're actually protecting our players' passwords so that I can never see them. And then for login, we have a server login function. It sort of works similar to the way the register widget works, which is taking our text boxes, data that's in there, and running on clicked. But instead of server create account here, we'd have server login. And then that's this function here, going through all the select data. Um, so well, that stuff is a basic login. Does the plugin automatically prevent injection? From my understanding, yes, and it actually keeps the cool thing about it is in one of Unreal Engine's limitations is not being able to send or to store data through level changes on unless you save it in the game instance. And what's nice about this is once it's created the first time, like once the connection properties are stored, it'll store it in the engine permanently through level change through everything, so you never have to create a new connection again, which is really nice. And I'll have to double check on if the plugin automatically prevents injection. Um, I wrote in some queries as well, and also the user account or the MySQL account that it's working with doesn't have, for example, it doesn't have any query. You couldn't execute a query, for example, that dropped all of the tables in the database. So there is no Johnny Tables ability for it. But that's you probably, even if the plugin doesn't, you probably want to write your queries so that you're sanitizing things going in anyways and preventing injection. Okay, so the next thing we wanted to cover after the login system was obviously how our characters are connected to all of this. And I'm actually, instead of walking you through it, I think what I'm going to do here is rebuild this entire system in front of you guys. So some of the stuff I'm going to keep, like the character initialization, the character create and stuff, because like this stuff already runs on the server and it works perfectly how it's supposed to. Other stuff I want to change though, like with our character system, is if you look at this mess of blueprints, this is not exactly how we want this to work. And in fact, it's really inefficient and doesn't work properly. So this stuff down here, I'm actually going to keep because this does work how I want it to work. So I'm gonna go ahead and drag all this. This is just a simple attack system that plays our animations and whatnot. But this is the main chunk of code that I want to change. This handles all of our equipment changes, and it's really messy, and the way I made it, it's just really inefficient, and for example, it's using multicast when it really shouldn't. Just things that overall aren't great for the server or the client, and that'll really lag everybody out. And then this is the other one that we're having problems with, is the add item to inventory function. We're just going to delete all of that for now. We don't need to use this because we're going to change our inventory system entirely. And we're going to build a new one. I already showed you how the inventory system works, and we're going to keep that same widget build that we had, but rebuild it from the ground up so that it's entirely client-side, so that if you watch this, you could take the aspects of what I show you and apply it to a single-player game as well as an MMO. So, before we get to that, though, we're going to clean up some of that code with the US character system, because this is just a huge mess, and it's not efficient at all. So I'm going to delete all of this, and what that was our system for equipping items. So if we were to go into game right now and run these commands, nothing would happen. Our player would not have any items on their body ever. It just wouldn't work. Now this part we're going to keep. This is our initialized character. It runs on the server. It actually runs really well and does its job how it's supposed to. The problem with these was that they were multicast. We don't want them to be multicast. We want them to run on the server only. So let's drag all of these up and let's make some changes to these because they're fundamentally flawed. The idea behind this is that I want to keep everything localized until we actually have to send data to the server. So that way the player isn't sending a million requests to the MySQL server for every little thing they do. We don't want that. So let's make sure that everything here from this point out only runs on the server. You don't need to check reliable, but let's update these all to say run on server. And that's equipping all of our paper doll slots with the gear that they need at this point. So I'm going to drag this down because it's kind of similar to how this is going to work from this point forward. So let's see. So this component replicates by default, which is what we wanted to check. That's telling Unreal Engine that it's supposed to show all clients when this changes. So with the equip chest part, what we're going to want to do here is run two separate commands. We're going to want to run one for the server and one for our client. So we're actually going to make a new custom event here, and we're going to call that client equip chest. And this is just going to run on the owning client. And it's going to be the same logic minus the actual sending of data to the MySQL server. We don't want our client to be sending data at all. We just want it. We only want the server to handle that. So in this case, every time we equip a chest piece, we're going to want to send that new information to our server. Let me drag all this stuff down. And we'll just... Actually, you know what? I'm going to delete all these functions for now. And this will get very confusing for them because these functions don't exist anymore. But we'll figure it. We'll make that work here soon. Okay. And let's add another variable to this, and we'll just call it ID. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with getting a data table based on the ID we're sent here. So I built an item database, so let's go ahead and look at that to show you exactly how it works. That's in my library here. So using an item struct, we have all of this data that we can send to our players from an internal database inside the game, our internal data table, and that includes everything from is the item stackable to the max stack size possible. So for example, with gold pieces, it's maxed at the max possible 2.1 billion. To chainmail, things like that, you know, what type of skeletal mesh it's going to equip to the player, what kind of bonuses it has to stats, a description, the name, the ID. The ID is the important part in this one. So let's run a for each loop here. And we are going to do a, oh, oops, sorry. Get data table row. So what this is doing is it's looking at item DB and it's taking all of the out row names, it's filtering them through. If it finds a row, it's then going to run against some logic. In this case, actually, sorry, we need to add one step to this. We're going to add a branch step to this because we want it to make sure that if this ever equals 0, it's not running this logic. Instead, it's skipping it entirely. And that's going to be useful for later down the line when we add items and when we're doing our armory work. So when it finds a row, now we need another logic here, right? So int equals int. Oh, whoops. No. So let's break this. We're going to make the row that it finds, whatever row it finds, if the ID of that row is equal to the ID that we're sending in equip chest, which all comes from here, if you can see it, which is what we're sending from the database. If that is equal to that, then we need to run our logic. If it's not, we do nothing. So in this case, we'll just branch that out like that. Okay. So if that ends up being true, let's actually, I'm gonna compress some of these so that we have, so it doesn't look so messy. In this situation, I'll drag some of these closer together. There we go. So if that's true, if this ends up being true, then we need to pull a bunch of other data from this. I have this thing called US Stats Global here, so all we're going to be doing when we get this is kind of pulling all of the variables from this and updating the stats. So, although I'm wondering if we have an equipment type, we might be able to change how this works entirely. And so I know this is kind of framed like a tutorial series, but this isn't really a tutorial as much as me building this in front of you guys. So if I go back on some things or if I change logic as I go through some stuff, it's because I'm learning along the way just as much as you guys are learning along the way with me. So we might not need to make an equip chest piece or an equip client equip chest. We might just be able to call these equip item. And then do a switch based on the type of item that we get. Oh, sorry. Just client equip item. That could be very interesting. So, on how we want to accomplish this, we have to really look through this logic and go over it. Kind of regretting changing some of the code that I did change, or deleting some of the code that I deleted earlier, because now I feel like I need it, but that's okay. We can go over that later. Okay. So let's pull off our equip type, and we're just going to run a switch here. So if this ID is equal to this, let's save that switch logic for later. We don't need that right now. What we need to do is take all of these and bring them back. So let's pull off our US Stats Global, and then we're just going to start pulling off get attack slash bonus, or set attack SLH bonus. It's kind of a lot that we're going to have to go through, but we'll go through it one by one and kind of make it work. So if it's true, we need to set this to whatever our current one is. So get attack slash bonus plus whatever data is being, or whatever this item's stats are. Then we're going to need to set attack stab bonus. Okay. We're going to have to come up with a better way of organizing this so that it's not all clustered right on top of each other, but just copy and paste that, and we will pull our stab bonus off of that. Now let's drag that here. Organization is really important when you're doing this. Just keep that in mind. Okay, and then let's set our attack crush bonus. off of that. And copy and paste. Well, actually, let's just copy and paste a couple of these, because we have a lot of bonuses to go through. So, and we'll delete whatever extras we don't have. So, and why is this not working? There we go. There we go. Sorry if I'm not talking while I'm doing this. Just getting all of these bonuses set up, because we are going to want these when we actually go through what the items do later on in the game development cycle. So, okay, cool. So I'm going to start sending these over, kind of. And attaching them to everything they need to go to. Okay, and so we need one more of these. Okay. And let's go ahead and start connecting everything up again. So we need to set our attack magic bonus, and that's for stuff like if you have magic armor, that gives you bonuses to your magic attack. So, and then connect that up. And we'll set our attack range bonus for the same concept, just drag and drop here. And the reason we're changing it to this only equip item thing, and just changing what happens based on the type of item it is primarily because I don't want super messy code. I only want to have to call this function once, based on what's happening. So, or once per click. I don't need to call it and have it update every single line of the database every single time, or for every item, or every time we initialize a character. We're trying to minimize, essentially, any strain that can be on the MySQL server. So having this function only run when it's absolutely necessary. Right now I'm hosting it locally, mostly because this is all internal. If I released the game with if I released the game with RuneScape's music and was like, come try it out, I would get sued. So this is really just my project of, can you build this? Can you build an MMORPG, without a full team? And I think the answer is yes, you can. It's going to have some limitations, but it's definitely possible. And the resources are out there, the tools and plugins are available to make it happen. So, okay. And then let's set our... Shoot. No, it's definitely not viable. I think it ultimately comes down to, though, somewhere I messed up here. Oh yeah, that's where I messed up. There it is. It's not really viable. I will agree with you on that. That being said, if you have the willpower, I think it is entirely possible. So, alright, so we set up all of our stat bonuses, and that is, yeah, that looks good. Excuse me. Okay. Now we need to set up what happens based on what type of item we have. So, Let's go with a client side. We need to change some of the client side stuff. So we're going to add another int here. We might not even need an ID in this situation. We're going to add a skeletal mesh component here. We're also going to add a static mesh, because these are what we need to send. Okay, perfect. I'm going to drag those down for the client-side equip item. And so for all of these, what we're going to do is run that client equip item on these. So for the main hand, for the offhand, for the chest, for legs. I apparently don't have the hand-eye coordination to actually drag all of these off, so let's just drag another 3 here. And then in these situations, so for our main hand, we use a skeletal mesh. So we'll send over that. We don't need to plug in anything else. Oh, crap. Sorry. That's got to connect to that. For our offhand, we use a static mesh. I'm going to break our skeletal mesh part. For our chest piece, that's a skeletal mesh because it has to be animated with our character's body. For our legs, another skeletal mesh has to be animated with our character's body. For our helmet, it's a static mesh. You can just attach it to the head. It doesn't really change much. Our boots has to be animated with the character's body, so skeletal mesh. And miscellaneous, we actually don't need to equip anything for miscellaneous, so we just leave that as is. And we will get to those in a second. So when we hit compile, that should work perfectly. We're sending that over. Before we get over to the data that we have to send over to the server side, we are going to look at the client equip item function and make sure that works. So oh, here's another function we have to add to that. Yeah, so we need to add a target mesh and then a target skeletal mesh. And so let's go down the line here. So this one is our main hand. So we're going to go to our weapon main hand, and we're going to make our target mesh. Oh, I got to drag some of these up so that I can actually see. Our target skeletal mesh, this one. Oh, wait, does that have to be an object reference? It does. So let's change this to skeletal mesh. How's that not a... Wait. Might be a skeletal mesh component? Yeah, sorry. It's a component. So there we go. And let's drag all these down. And I think this is the same thing. It's going to be a static mesh component. Compile there. Okay. And so for our offhand, we'll add a target mesh there. And for our chest piece, let's drag off that. And that's going to be our new target there. For our legs, once again, target skeletal mesh. For our helm, target static mesh. And for our boots, target skeletal mesh. Okay, and so all client equipped helm is going to do is set and set static mesh. That might fail sometimes, but we could actually put in some logic to tell us which one it is. So let's actually do that. So let's take this and we'll just run an isValid function on it. Yep. And so if that is, then we set it. And if it's false, we just run another logic here. Once again, is valid, but this time it's going to be for our target mesh. And if it is, we do that. And if it's false, we do nothing. And then we're just going to plug in that. Plug in. Oh, sorry. Plug in that. Plug in that. And plug in that. And toggle off reinitialize because we shouldn't have to do that. And that's all we need for the client side. Like, this is only executing on the client. Actually, no, sorry. Let's make that multicast because we need it to send. We do need the server to update it to all the other players. So, but since that's replicating to all, that's fine. Now we only want the data sending part to run on the server, which is what this main equip function is. That's why we separated these two. So now we're going to build out some logic for sending this equipment data to our database. So in this case, we're going to update data from query, and we're going to do it async. Reason for using async is we don't want this to be the only function running when it's sending the data. Great reason for that. Excuse me. There is a great reason for that. Sorry, I'm coughing and sneezing off screen, but there is a good reason for running it async. We don't want our clients to lag out every time they equip an item or every time their character initializes. Or, yeah, it's just to run this in the background and let other functions run at the same time as this one's running. So we might have to run a couple of different ones, a couple different scenarios. So let's look at what our table looks like. We're going to drag out an append here so that we can kind of put this all together. And we will need a couple of different things. So, an easy way for me to do this is to, for example, let's look at our user character. We just want to change that to 1. And that's the only function we need. So for the chest or for whatever it is. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that in. And we're going to start breaking this string up for the query. And perfect. So what we need to plug in here is the item ID. So in this situation, we'll just drag out this. And we will call that, or let's add a reroute node. And I'm going to kind of run that over the top there so that it's even. There we go. Okay. And so what that's doing is sending the item ID into our character database. And the next thing we need is our player ID. And that's going to tell us what ID to store it under. So I'm going to bring our player ID up here actually just for some organization purposes, and we'll just drag these kind of off at the same time. Yeah, perfect. Okay, and we're not updating the chest in this situation. We are going to be updating, I'm just going to drag this off evenly here. We're going to be updating our main hand, which that table is called the equip main hand in our database. So let's go ahead and change that to reflect that. And this should work perfectly. We shouldn't have to do anything past this. This is the end of this function. Let's bring our string up, and we're just going to kind of copy and paste this as many times as we need to. To get this function, or to finish it, and we'll just go through and we'll change it to reflect whatever we're calling off. So if it's equipping the helmet, or if it's equipping something else, yeah. Okay, perfect. So for our next one, we're going to be doing our offhand, so we'll just change one word here, offhand, and then we will just drag these down. I might actually drag these over just a little bit because they're a little bit in the way here. Yeah, that works. Okay, this next one is going to be our chest piece. So what we had originally was equip chest. We'll just do that. And let's drag some reroute nodes down here as well. So we can just drag off of these when we need them. Okay. Kind of similar to here. All the same. And then, yeah. And then we'll go through and make sure these are all set. So that's chest. This one's going to be legs. So after legs is our helm. And after helm is our boots. And that is the end of that. So let's go ahead and drop our equip item as many times as we need it here. And let's see if this new function actually works how it's supposed to. It might not. It might work just fine. Oh, actually, we'll have to change some things because of our armory script. It's not going to reflect correctly. I just realized that. So before we can even test if this works, we need to change some things up with how we built this. Okay, perfect. So let's drag all of this out, and we're going to add a comment around it called equip. We'll call it equip functions. Okay, so now that that's all done, now that we have that all set up, now that that updates to the database, for testing purposes, what we want, though, I'm going to add a print string after all of these. And just so it can tell me exactly what query it's sending, so then I know if it's sending or not, or that it's entering correctly. Actually, you know what? Let's double do that. For the testing purposes, I want to check the query execution state on all of these. And we'll switch on this. So we're going to print out a couple things. Actually, let's just switch this to executing. And I'm going to run a delay off of it. Let's drag that up here. And we'll make the delay 0.5 so we don't end up with an infinite loop situation. And we'll just run this back to check query so that it keeps checking until it finishes executing. If it succeeds, let's print out we'll print out exactly what we succeeded with, and we'll just leave it there. And if it fails, we want to know why it failed. So we'll need an error message, right? And let's just copy all of that code over. Pull off our append here. Kind of not a whole lot of space for it, but we need the debug purposes, so. I'll worry about reorganizing. We're going to delete this anyway, so I'm not too worried about the organizational aspect of how it looks right now. Okay, that's all done. So now, it's not going to let us compile the game because we made some changes to our base game mode, and this is going to mess with all of these because those functions no longer exist. We only need to run client equip item and then set style for these. So I need to look at these to make sure they're okay. I know some of this stuff you probably wouldn't have had to created. I'm just going to open up all of these and go through them. And yeah, there we go. Okay. So let's go through our chest. And I need to make sure that the styling is correct on our chest. I noticed in some situations. Oh, that one actually saved because it's the same functions as it was before. That was originally the equip chest function. Let's look at our helm. That looks correct. Okay, and then equip item. Perfect. And let's make sure our legs look fine. Yep, they look good. Now let's look at our main hand and our offhand. That's why. Okay. And so we'll run another equip item in the line there, and boom, boom, compile. And then the same thing for our offhand. We need to look at the style. I don't know where this got incorrectly added, but it did. So we need to give it a shield icon, and then I'm going to copy and paste these styles here for it. Okay, and then update it for the equip item function. So there was one thing I forgot to do. We forgot to add with the equip item client. I wanted to change my armory system to kind of. Ooh, sorry. We need to go back through all this because what we're equipping is item 0. Sorry, that was my mistake. We have to. Actually, I don't care. Let's test first and make sure that these things work. So when we log in, hey, so it's not working properly. Um. I wonder why that is. Because we have helmets here, we have main hands, we have off hands. So we need to check and see why exactly our function did not work in this situation. Because it didn't tell us at all, did it? Oh, that's why. Hey, Macarena. Okay, I had the wrong functions there. If it is equal to 0, we didn't want that. We need to change that to if it's equal to false. So let's look here. Hey, yeah, it actually, that looks pretty right. Our hair is still saved. That was a function that I built, the hair removal. I built that last time differently, so we'll have to remove that. But this looks like it worked perfectly, so let's just click this and see executing. Oh my god. Okay. It's actually storing everything how it's supposed to store. So that's looking good. Actually pretty happy with how that turned out. We do have to make some changes. So let's go back through all of our boots because this is the unequip feature. So right now it was equipping nothing. We're going to save that item there because we're going to need it later. But we need to tell it to equip item 0. And the reason we need to tell it to do that is because we're telling our database that our person doesn't have armor on anymore. And the reason he doesn't have armor on anymore is because he took it off. So when they hit this button, assumingly, it'll update to the database and say equip 0. So let's write that in. Because when we're saying equip 0, right now it's telling it not to do anything. Which is not what we want, right? So we need to copy some of this, right? And we need to run a client equip item if it's true. I'm going to just drag this off down here. And then we need to tell it to update data to the server. This is where it gets a little tricky, because if the item is 0, it's not going to have anything in the equip type. So we're going to add a new type here, or a new enumerator here called equip type. I'm just going to call this equipment. And the reason we're going to do that is because we want to send a bunch of different data to our server. In fact, what we want to send is all of this. drag client equip item. We want to send all of this stuff down. My god, this is a mess. Okay. This is a serious mess at this point. So we're going to drag all of this. Helmet or boots? Man. Trying to keep all of this code compressed into a small space is almost near impossible for me. I need to work on my blueprint organization. Come on, drag. Okay, and so we're going to tell it to equip 0 here on all of these. And then we'll take our player ID, because we need that, and we'll just plug it into all of these where it's supposed to go. So this was an easy function to just copy and paste together. It's probably got to be an easier way to go about this, but that seems to do the trick for most of it. Ah, damn it. I missed one. Okay, and perfect. Alright, so our main hand is the first one we're going to be doing. And we're just going to leave it blank. Everything just stays blank. We'll drag off our offhand here. It's going to be a target mesh. This next one is going to be our chest plate, which is static mesh, but we leave the meshes blank because we're updating it to say there's nothing there to add. Legs is the next one. Helmet right after that. So that's our target status mesh, and then boots. So that's our target skeletal mesh there. Before we do anything else, we need to look at our helmet function, right? Because we need to tell it that our helmet, we don't want that on anymore. So let's look at our helmet. We'll look through our client equip helmet, and we'll just add one more function to it. And so we're just going to set static mesh on sorry, not that, on our hair. To nothing. And then we're also going to set helmet equipped to positive. And then when we go back down over here, so we have our helmet here with the client equip helmet item. We're also going to kind of do the same thing, right? So we're going to, but I have an update hair function built in. So what I'm going to do is set helmet equipped to not. And then I am going to run that update hair function, because it'll use the saved hairstyle from the database. Okay, and so now let's, it looked like there was one function that I needed to change here. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah. Oh, that's what we have to do. Okay, yeah. So, equipment type. In this case, this is the main hand. And this is the offhand. And this is our helmet. I think we also need to do the chest and legs too. Oh no, chest and boots, that's what it is. Okay, with our chest and our boots, let's make sure that looks good. And with our boots. Okay, perfect. Alright, let's test out that all works now. So, go with the test one, here, our count. So it updated everything. As you can see, my hair has disappeared now. So in our database, let's look at our character here, and let's look. So he has a chest piece equipped, he has a helmet equipped, he has a shield and an offhand equipped. And so what we're gonna do here is just kind of remove these items in this situation. So it did unequip it, but it didn't do my hair again, which is unfortunate. And it didn't save to the server for whatever reason. So let's try that again. See if it's running the function. It does not seem to be running it, so there's got to be a reason for that. Let's try it with another one. Did we not set up our chest properly? Oh, it's setting it with the item, that's why. So that's not going to unequip. So let's look at what we have now here. So what I'm seeing, basically, is that it's not actually sending any of the queries that we just told it to send. I mean, it is, but it isn't. So I am a little concerned about that. We're going to hit stop on this and look at... So it never updated in the database that any of these have been unequipped, for example. Or have been equipped or unequipped, whatever the case may be. And that's not what we want to happen. Also, we need to break that so that makes sense. So we're telling it it's 0, and then we're sending it to here, where we're telling it to update this data. And it doesn't seem to want to. Is the big problem I'm having with any of this. I just realized we need to make all of these replicated, so. This is a really confusing one for me right now. Because it should be working. You know what I'm going to do for right now? Sorry, something was changed with my inventory icon here. Oh, that's what changed with it. That's why. Okay. So these are for our inventory buttons. so that when you click on an item, something happens. Sorry if I'm looking so confused. I actually am as to why those weren't executing when they should have. I'm going to change these all to reflect what they're supposed to do, even if they don't. Okay. Chest, leg, helmet, and boots. There we go. Alright, so that should work now. I'm going to give it one more try. Well, actually, let's add some debugging to this and see why it's not 100% working. So let's go into our character again. We have all this crazy coding written for it, but nothing to kind of back it up. Let's pull our debug stuff off again. We had this last time. And yeah, there we go. I'm just going to drag it down here, or start it here. I'm very confused right now. And hopefully adding all this debug stuff will actually give us a glimpse into what the reasoning is, but okay, so here's all the debug stuff. And now we can take a look into why maybe this isn't working properly, or how it's supposed to be working. So all of our equipment's equipped there, right? So let's look. When we unequip, it successfully ran that. At least it told us it successfully ran that. But then didn't actually unequip anything. Where is it getting player ID 11 from? Ah, that's where it's getting player ID 11 from. Hey! Found it. So that probably wasn't working at all for any of these. I had an extra number in there that I was adding. And while if there was a player ID 11, it would have worked, there is not a player ID 11. And so it didn't. Let's double check that these don't have that as well. They do. So that's why none of this was working properly. Always important to double check that you don't have any numbers in there. Okay. That's why debugging is important. That little log that popped up in there told us everything it needed to tell me. Alright, so it is consistently executing something. I'm not sure what. But none of my inventory is showing up, and I don't know why it's consistently executing this either. Because I'm not clicking on anything. Let's find out which one is the one that's consistently executing. Is the problem. Okay, so this time it's not doing that, right? And also, this time did not save my sword for some reason. So, okay, let's equip a sword. There it is. Executed. It updated correctly. So let's go to see if that's reflected in the database. And it is. Cool. Let's do the same thing for these boots. Perfect. Beautiful. Boots are updated there too. Man, this is actually coming along pretty well. So now we need to do the same thing for our armor, or we need to check that our armory function works here. So in this case, we're going to unequip our chest piece. Let's check that it's set to 0. It is. Let's unequip our helmet. Add set to 0. Perfect. That's working quite well. I'm actually pretty happy with how that turned out. Our helmet unequipped, our boots equipped, our main hands equipped. Everything worked really well with how that ended up turning out. So, good. That's a good start. So, the next thing we need to do is create a new function for our inventory system that actually adds our inventory into place. I think we can remove most of the debugging stuff at this point because we know that this works. So there's no reason to constantly check the execution state. Sometimes it'll lag a little bit, but this will at least allow us to clean most of this up and have it more compact. Perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to do, now that we don't need all that space, is actually drag most of this function down. So it's kind of on its own here. I like my blueprints to be as clean as they possibly can. I know it's kind of impossible in most situations to get these looking clean, especially when you're running a ton of data at the same time into them, but if we can get it even looking a little cleaner than it is right now, I'll be happy. There we go. The thing we still need to figure out is the helmet taking off. It doesn't seem to be actually pulling our hairstyle out and updating it, which I'm hoping might just be a mistake I made somewhere along the way with our hair. We might actually need to set our hairstyle in this situation then. Yeah, so let's try this. Let's set our hairstyle to whatever index is getting pulled off for hair here. Now let's test that out. Let's see if that works. Okay, it didn't upload. It didn't update my inventory yet, but it will in about 30 seconds once that's set. I am pretty happy with how this turned out. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. It feels pretty good. Come on, update to the server already. Perfect. I'm surprised it actually hasn't initialized that update yet. It's a little weird that it hasn't. I killed a man. Okay, there we go. Update happened. So let's equip our helmet. There we go. And then let's unequip our helmet as soon as it... As soon as it decides to update. Okay, it actually worked. That is awesome. I am genuinely impressed with how that ended up working out. It saves our hair. It saves our model. One thing I did notice that I'm going to check here is with the equip client stuff, I didn't target... I initially unchecked this. We want that checked at this point. I think we want to reinitialize the pose. Okay. So, our character's initialized. I don't know why we would quit game. There, that was a bad call. Character's initialized, our hair is done. The next thing to do is figure out the inventory. The problem I had with how I built it is, let's take a look at this. It's a very complex, and it's not complex, but it's very messy code. You can see these wires are crisscrossed all over the place. What it's doing is it's looking through our inventory and inserting a button for every single time or every single entry that's there. So in this case, our user inventory data looks like this. So it'll pull let's say we have a helmet in our slot 1. So the way it parses it is it looks for the first number, which is 2, that's the item ID, and then the stack amount, which is 1. For gold, for example, we have 7 and then 150,000, and then it'll parse that into what you saw in game, which was 150k gold pieces. The problem is finding a way to insert these into the correct place. So, and the other problem is it's using an update inventory system, which calls every time we construct it. And every time we click it, it initially called it every time we clicked on it. It's a really inefficient way of doing it, in my opinion. We could leave it how it is, and in theory, it technically would work. Actually, I'm calling it update inventory old. I want to design a new one, but maybe we can play around with this. And what we need next is essentially, it's called the add item function. And so we're going to take that away from our we're going to move away from our equipment functions for now. And we're going to look at how we can add an item to our character. So let's drag this up a little bit underneath that. So let's call this add item. Or, no, we gotta add custom event. Add custom event. We're gonna call this add item to inventory. Our replication style, it's gonna run on the server only. We don't need to call this on our player yet. Well, because in this we'll call the client side event, which is update inventory, which will pull all of our data from the server. At least that's how I would picture it working. It's going to be interesting because I don't think this inventory system would work right now as it does. Okay. So maybe let's rebuild our inventory system. Let's maybe create something in our character. We can keep our armory the same because it's a relatively small amount of data. When we build it, it doesn't really... I mean, it processes some of this, but... Create separate. Yeah, this works. It's simple enough that it works. Hey Tech Dude, how's it going? Sorry, this is a relatively uninformative stream, I think, but trying to make it work. We might need to mess with how our armory works as well. Currently, everything is functioning how it's supposed to, but I think we need to make some changes. I think we have to. So, before we look at that add inventory, add an item to inventory, we're going to make a new variable, and we're going to call this inventory. And what this is going to be is an array of items. So, let's make that an array of items. Let's compile. And what you'll see here is, just that. It just compiles the item information into one single array. How we go from here is an entirely new question on how we approach doing our inventory. I'm going to make that like that. We're going to make it instance editable in this case. I'm going to make it replicated. Why not? We need that information to go server side. Okay. So I have to think here. Let's pull out our inventory. Let's look at our string functions, because that's what's going to be important here is when importing into the database is what our string looks like. We're probably going to have to rewrite the entire inventory table in this case. That's what it's looking like to me. So under our utilities, let's look at our strings and see what we have. We can obviously append a string. This might be what we need. Okay. I'm kind of liking this. So, concentrates an array of strings into a simple string. And we want to separate each element of like that. Now, we can completely wipe these tables out. Or completely change how they work. So we're going to go into our database. I'm going to remove all of these. Risky move, I know. We're just going to call this inventory. We're going to make it a varchar here. I think you can make the length set on this 255. Default on it's going to be 0. We're going to empty our tables too. Oh, we don't have to. Okay, so that's what our inventory looks like right now, right? What's going to happen is we're going to run a for each loop when we update our inventory. And let's actually just call this add items to inventory. Oh man, this is okay. So let's call this update inventory, and then we're gonna call this add item or add custom. We're gonna add a custom event here, and this is add item to inventory, and this is gonna be a client side event, right? I don't even think this needs to. Let's run on the owned client here. So let's do our update inventory function first, right? So for update inventory, what we're going to do is we're going to run a for each loop. We also need to add an inventory max size, which I might need to do some quick math here. I think it's like 4 by 8. It's a 32. Wow, my math is... I should have known that. So let's create a max inventory, in this case, max inventory size. We don't need to make that instance editable, but this is fine. Or sorry, not instance editable. We don't need to make this replicate. It doesn't need to be an array. It needs to be a single thing here. Okay. So if the array index is, in this case, I think we said 32. So if it's less than 31, or sorry, if it's greater than... So what happens, what we're checking for is if the array index is greater than the max inventory size, then we don't do anything. We just stop running. If that's true, let's actually make it a for each loop with break. So if that's true, we'll break it. If it's false, then we need to start breaking this up. So we're going to make another one. We're going to call it inventory string array. So we need these two things because we need to send this. We're going to replicate this one, though. We need to send this to the server. So if it's true, if the array index is less than or is greater than the max inventory size, we don't do anything. But if it's not, we're going to need to get this, and then we're going to need to break this. And we're going to need to pull the ID. Let's actually make our separator this. Instead of a comma, we'll separate it into that. And so what that's going to look like is, for example, 1, 3. And that means we'll have a stack of 3 of whatever item ID 1 is, separated into a stack of 7, which has 1,500, right? That's what an inventory would look like. I'm actually going to change it to 1, I believe, is chainmail, so you can only have a stack of 1 of that. But so we're going to append it. Going to add our ID. We're going to add a comma. Oh, we might need to take some. Okay, so we need to make some changes to our item struct. So let's go back into our scripts folder. If we're going to make this work, we need to add one thing, and it's going to be current stack. That's going to be another integer. Default, by default, is... Well, actually, we should set the default to 1, but... So under here, what's going to happen is we're going to run a check real quick. So if it's false, we need to run another check. And we're going to check, is our item stackable? If it is, we're going to add that. And so this is what it should look like. If it's not, we're going to run another add. And we're going to pull it from that. And it's going to be similar, but it's just going to be our item ID and then a count of 1. Okay, once that's completed, once all of that's completed, now we're going to update all of this data to our MySQL server. So update data from query, and we're going to run it asynchronously. So oh, wait, sorry. We need to actually make this work. So we already did this, for example. So let's make this work. So let's go ahead and paste. Our string goes there, the one that our stringer goes there. And then we need another one here. So for our ID, we're just going to take, once again, we set this earlier, we're going to take our player ID. Perfect. And then let's just add a semicolon, and that's our string. And then let's print it after to make sure we're sending the right one. That looks good. That is our updated inventory system. I'm going to go ahead and set this to 0, because it would mean there's nothing in there. And that, to me, says everything we need to say. Or that does everything we need to do. For now, we need to check our inventory. We need to now add items to the inventory, essentially. So we'll need some item IDs here. Feel like I'm hitting a roadblock, a brick wall here with this one. This is interesting on how I want to approach it, but so obviously we want to get our inventory. We want to add to this, so shit. And we want to make our items. So what we're going to do here is kind of almost plug in everything word for word, like bonuses and everything, except the current stack size. That's going to be our item count, if the item is stackable. So we'll get to all that in a second here. Let us make some changes. So we're going to pull some of the logic that we built over here for this, and we're going to say, yeah. If it's 0, do nothing. Although there would never be a reason for me to add item to 0, so we're not going to do that. It is just going to be somehow this didn't get transferred, so give me a second. Let's break this row. And if the ID is equal to the item ID, then we need to run another check. So our next check is stackable. And if that's true, then we add it like this. We're sending all of that over, sending the max stack size. But the only thing we're changing is the item count. Okay, that's as simple as that logic is going to be. If it's false, it's gonna actually, I don't even think there needs to be an extra logic for this. I think it's just, if it's true, just add it to whatever the stack size is that we send. And now we can go through all of our armory buttons, and what we're going to do here is drop that down a little bit and add item to inventory. And we'll call the item count 1 here. And just, yeah, it's as simple as this now. And what this should do is every time now that we click on our armory button, or like call the armory update, which I think I'm going to leave the same. I think this should work fine. Every time we click on it, it's going to add the item to our inventory. So, let's make sure it gets added to all those buttons. Close out of that, close out of that. And we're going to address the inventory in a second as soon as we finish the armory stuff up. Okay. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Armor button boots. Let's go back into our UI here. And we'll do our helm, our legs, our main hand, our offhand. Because I think those are all missing that. I think our chest has it already, if I remember correctly. Perfect. So yeah, if you guys are following along, I know it's not really a tutorial just as much as watching me build a game. What we're doing right now is building out the functions for a revamped inventory. How I had it before was really inefficient and caused a lot of lag to the player, and in some cases didn't even update things properly. With this new system, it's going to take care of all of that. So, okay. So now that that's taken care of, we need to build another function. And what that is remove from inventory. Also, we need to check one more thing on the add item to inventory. I think there was one thing I was forgetting. Yeah, that's what it was. So before we start any of this, get length. Or sorry, it's just length should be fine. We need the length of this array, and we need our max inventory size. And if this is greater than or equal to this, then this function cannot run. If it's true, do nothing. If it's false, run. We'll just say, we'll print a string here to tell our players inventory is full. Okay, so now we need a remove from inventory function. So let's add another custom event here. And we'll call it remove from inventory. And this is going to be run on our own client as well. And kind of the same thing here. We are just going to look through our inventory function. So pull out an item ID. And then we'll do a for each loop with break. And what we're going to do is basically compare this. So let's break our item struct, and we're just going to compare the ID here in this situation. And so okay, yeah. So we need to run a check here. So we'll run a branch, and it's going to check, is the item we're removing equal to an item that's in our array? If it is, then we need to remove the item. That's simple. I'm trying to think of what else you would need for this, because I wanted to do like a check for like gold. Currently, there's no way to use it is the thing, so it might be having to update an item, for example. Let's see. Let's set array element. Or maybe like update. Let's look at our array functions and see if there's a way to. We actually need to do a remove index, not remove item. There's a reason for that, because we don't want to remove all instances. For example, if we had 2 chainmail bodies in our inventory, if we just did remove item, it would remove every single item there. So let's run another check, actually. So we're going to run another branch here. I'm going to disconnect this. And our branch is going to check, is a remove item count equal to our current stack? If it is, then we just remove the index entirely. If it isn't, we're going to remove the index that we're given, and then actually build an. Well, first let's. And then add Hmm. This is going to be interesting on how we accomplish this, so... Okay, I know what we'll do. So if it isn't, we're going to add to our inventory. And we're just kind of pulling all of these same things over again. So like name, ID, description, type, tax bonuses or price, tax stab, this, yada, yada, yada. There you go. But we're going to update our count to reflect what the new count is. So our current stack is going to be int minus int. And that's going to set our new current stack. And then we're going to remove the old array index, right? Oh, shit. That's the wrong one. We're going to remove the old one. And then we'll call a break here. Okay, that's the remove item function built into it. So now that we have that, we can start working on our inventory icons again and our inventory. Let's do the inventory icons first because I think that's the easiest. We're not going to even update any data. What we're going to do here is take our US character and remove item from inventory. Which for whatever reason doesn't want to show. What the hell? Let's see why that's not popping up here. What do we call it? Add item to inventory, remove from inventory. Oh, because I said I just called it remove from. There we go. Okay. Whatever item we're sending it. In this case, these are all armor, so we're only removing one count of it. That handles that very nicely. Okay, so now the next step is to update the actual inventory script that we wrote earlier to reflect the new changes we made to our inventory system. This is a complete mess. We don't want this anymore. What we want is the local player inventory, because that's what matters. Oh, crap. Actually, let's keep this code around, because... Oops. Let's keep that code around. And we're just going to write a new function. It's called update, or build inventory. Okay, and cast entire US character, and get widget owner. Get owning local player. Get player character. Maybe this should work. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. There we go. Get owning player pawn. Okay, and now we need to take our inventory. Get inventory, right? We're also going to have to build a function in our character called retrieve inventory. That's going to be important, and that's going to have to be called as we initialize the character. So, okay, inventory. So let's run a for each loop. Let's make this simple. We are going to create a widget for each item in our inventory. And that's going to be our inventory icon widget. Owning player is going to be us. Yeah, that's fine. Or, sorry, just get owning player. Okay. So, with our inventory icon widget, we need a couple of things that we have to show it. So, we also need to make it wrap properly. So let's break this down into our item. And we're going to give it what it needs. So, type, item ID, icon ID, stack amount, and we're also going to need to pull off our player ID. Actually, we probably don't need that anymore. Let's go to our inventory because we don't need our player ID anymore. I don't think. Not for what we're doing. Perfect. Okay. That should be good. Now for the DB column and DB row thing, that's going to be interesting on how we do that. I don't even think we need those anymore. Yeah, we don't. They're not plugged into anything anymore because we're not updating anything into those rows. And for the stack amount, we can probably literally just make that an int. So it's plugging in. There's no conversion necessary. And then we'll just current stack. And let's go ahead and delete the old inventory. We don't need it anymore. And let's call build inventory. We'll need those in construct and pre-construct. Okay. Actually, I don't think we need them on construct or pre-construct. What we need them for is every time we open the inventory and close it, that's where we need it. So we're creating an inventory icon widget, and now we need to add this widget to a uniform grid. So add child, and our content is going to be that. So we have to find out which row and which column we're adding it to, right? So the easy way to do that is column-wise, we're just going to take our index, our array index. We need to make some changes to it. So let's add some local variables here. And we're going to call this one max I, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18 19 20 21 22 23 24 25 26 27 28 29 30 31 32 33 34 35 36 37 38 39 40 41 42 43 44 45 46 47 48 49 50 51 52 53 54 55 56 57 58 59 60 61 62 63 64 65 66 67 68 69 70 71 72 73 74 75 76 77 78 79 80 81 82 83 84 85 86 87 88 89 90 91 92 93 94 95 96 97 98 99 100 101 102 103 104 105 106 107 108 109 110 111 112 113 114 115 116 117 118 119 120 121 122 123 124 125 126 127 128 129 130 131 132 133 134 135 136 137 138 139 140 141 142 143 144 145 146 147 148 149 150 151 152 153 154 155 156 157 158 159 160 max inventory. Well, no, I won't go past it. So let's call this max or current row and current column. Because we don't want it to overlap. Because what this will do is if you just let it add, it'll just keep adding rows and then columns, like a million of them until your inventory reaches its max. And it'll all add it to the same row. So current row, current column. By default, it's got to be 0, 0, right? Let's run some checks. So we need to run a couple of conditions. So is our current row greater than 8? Actually, I don't even think we need to run a check for the current row. What we need to do is run a check for the current column. So int greater than int. If it's greater than 3, then we need to make some changes. If it's false, add it to the child, and then we are just going to increment this. So that's as simple as that one goes. Let's let it return node for our onComplete of the loop. Inventory is done building. Make sure we always want to use that return node. If it is greater than 3, we need to do 2 things. We need to set our current row to int plus... we need to increment our current row. Sorry. And then... I don't know why this has a space in it, but there we go. That's more correct. We need to set our current column to 0. Then we can add a child to the uniform grid. And that builds our inventory. That is as easy as it is to build our inventory with the icons and everything like that. So what it's doing is it is going to add all of our images to this inventory grid, which is a uniform grid, every time we run the build inventory function. That should be good, I think. The inventory icon, if it's stackable, it'll set the text on some stuff and stack amounts. But yeah, overall, I think this is about as easy as it's going to get. So now let's go back into our scripts. We need to make some changes to our... Let's save everything. Always, keep in mind to save. We need to make some changes. So our update inventory is just updating data, right? But we need to retrieve that data at some point too. So let's crawl over to here, and we're going to add a new custom event. And this is going to be retrieve data. And for this one, this is going to be this is going to be another kind of the server doing everything. Yeah, so we're replicating that to the owning client, whereas the update function is replicating it from the client to the server. This time we want to pull the data from the server. In addition, with this one, I think we can just check this as... Yeah, just run on the owning client, whatever. Leaving that is fine. So we need to do a couple of things. We need to pull some data. So we're going to start by selecting data from a query, async. We're going to write this query. And what this is going to do, we're just going to do this. So append the string from, we're taking all the data from the USM where our ID is equal to our player ID. There's only one row for it to pull that data from, and that's the inventory row. So we don't even need to select all. What we could do is, I'm just going to make sure this works, but select inventory. Yeah, so we're just going to select the inventory function. It's literally one column of data for us to pull. And then for the retrieve data, we're going to need to run a couple of checks. So we're going to need to check data, or check query execution state. Since it's an async, we're going to need to switch on this, and we'll just say grabbing data and print, and then do a delay. Let's make that 0.5 seconds. When it's successful, then we get our data table. So our data, we'll get our selected table from the MySQL thing. So we selected the inventory column from the US, so we need a result by column in this situation. Or I suppose we could even use results by row and get a copy of the first row it pulls, which is, it's only going to pull one row. So we're basically doing get a copy, and that's pulling a string. And it's going to pull this string that we got earlier. So we need to parse this into an array, I believe. And then essentially run a for each loop on this. Yeah, this is wild. And then we're adding our items to the inventory every single time. So we're only going to be calling the retrieve inventory function, I think at the initial start of this. I think that's for the best. There's got to be a way to, so once it's, the string, it's got to be chopped. So let's start with a left chop, which okay. So we need a right chop. And we are We need a right and a left chop. So we're taking the length of the string and we're subtracting 1 from it and chopping to the left. Because what's that's going to do is get the item ID. If this all works correctly. Jeez, this is one hell of a... We also have to change our character create now because some of those functions aren't going to work at all. And then with the right chop, we're just taking whatever's past the comma and making that our item count. Okay. So this should be as simple as it gets. Under our kind of initialize here, once this is all completed and done with everything that it has to do, I think the next thing is telling it to retrieve our inventory data, and then we need to go into our new bar here, or our right bar, our HUD, which I could just call right bar, and we're going to need to tell the inventory to update, or rather, to build. Let's see if this works. I've got a feeling there's going to be some bugs, but yeah, that's one of them. It did not seem to initialize my character at all in this situation. Okay, let's look at where it was initializing earlier, but something has clearly changed in the initialization function that I must have missed. Well, that seems to work. Well, I wonder what I messed up here. Why it wasn't initializing there. Let's try it one more time. Oh, there we go. Okay. Why is it grabbing data constantly? So it's not running that is the problem. Oh. Okay, just steal my shield. Alright, so a retrieve data function might be a little broken, is what I'm learning. It is stuck in a perpetual loop of execution. Oh. It's because I'm an idiot. the last state it pulled was the execution state, right? So it just looped itself forever. Let's restart the dedicated server. And let's run this. Let's run this bad boy. Hey! There's nothing in our inventory right now, is the problem. But we can check and see if we can add stuff to it. And it did. Oh, man. Okay. So if we look in our inventory, all of that stuff actually just got added. That's awesome. All of the things unequipped properly. So the problem is now we need to actually Oh, shit. I think I just crashed it. Yeah, there it is. Update inventory old. That's the crash. Let's restart this project. Man, that was an unfortunate crash. So something with the inventory icons is actually calling, I think, the wrong spell here. So good thing we saved everything. Let's go ahead and look at our inventory icon, because the crash happened when we clicked on that, and it tried to call a function that just doesn't exist, right? Which was update inventory old. Oh, and it might be the update inventory icon empty part too. Oh no, there's nothing in here. Okay. That should be fine. We don't use those inventory icons anyways, right? So, problem is, where is it calling update inventory old? Because I don't see it calling it anywhere. Unless it's under equip item. Which it doesn't look like there is one there, so yeah, there's not. I'm not calling it anywhere in here. I think maybe there was just something cached incorrectly there that caused it to crash. Which is ultimately unfortunate. So let's add a couple of things. Actually, let's see if we can build our inventory properly this way with the update function, right? So let's add 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 6, 1, into our database here. 7, 1. That is all of the items in the game. Actually, and let's make that 150,000 just to double check that things still work. They don't actually. They won't. So let's make it 50. Let's make it 1,500 just to check. Okay. All right. So I don't know why I put that there, but let's put it here because we actually needed our one. And then let's check. We need to figure out when we're going to be telling or updating the inventory, right? So my assumption, like, you could put it on a timer, right? And you could say every 30 seconds, I want you to update the inventory. And I think that's where the code issue is, actually. It's within the game mode itself. I run, I believe in the player character or the game mode, a code. We'll look at the create character. Yeah, this is it. So we are actually going to before we do that, this is running in the player controller, which I don't feel the need for necessarily. Yeah, this is gonna be a hard one to solve here. We have to update our armory code. We just have to. But we'll approach that soon. We don't need this tick. I don't. Well, we do. Let's just. We need it for now to get things working. No, you know what? Okay. Let's run a cast to US character, and we'll get our player pawn. Right, and we're gonna run update inventory. So replicated to our server. The server is the one casting, or is the one calling this Oh boy, hitting play on an empty map. Fatal error. Surprise. Shock. Thank you, Unreal Engine. So many little issues that you have to deal with while you're making this, but let's open back up. Let's open the map back up. That should have saved everything properly. Let's hit run dedicated server. Perfect. It started. And then let's test out our new world, right? So we're logged in. We have no items in our armory, but we do have them in our inventory. It actually worked, and it created them. I'm actually thoroughly impressed. It's creating this white item, which I don't know what that does or why it does that, but the rest of our items are here. And then every 30 seconds, it's going to update our inventory to tell us that we have new items. So the poses aren't reinitializing, but here is everything. When you hit spacebar, it kind of goes. I need to mess with those. Hey, it just gave me more gold is the problem. So that might be an issue with the build inventory function itself. It's just going to keep adding these every 30 seconds to our inventory, which is essentially a dupe bug that I just made. Just unfortunate, but I don't know. No, okay, it seems to be working how it should. Let's kill this guy. Nice. Alright. Also got some shader errors on some of these things that are making me question things, but I think this worked pretty well, in all honesty. I'm gonna look at our armory just to check things, but yeah, okay, it's given me at this point 100 or 1,500 gold stacks. It's actually created this one twice on top of each other, which is not good. Now if we look at our user character, it does have all of the correct things equipped, so that's good. The only thing that's questionable that didn't work seems to be the armory. And then those didn't get added back to our inventory, which is a little weird. Let's see. That all unequipped properly. That's a little weird. It's created so many of these now. Okay, so debug-wise, we seem to be running into just one issue here with the unequipping. So let's look at our armory buttons and see what's going wrong here. So it seems to be, it did unequip correctly, but the add item to inventory portion does not seem to be working properly. Ooh, you know what we need to do? Okay, so that's going to be part of it is... Well, it seems like it added it. It definitely... It's adding. Let's print a string to say that item has been added. Just to make sure. And then let's log in. Okay, we got 5 stacks of gold here. Something is wrong with the update function because it keeps adding new gold. And then let's give ourselves some chess pieces here because this is what we're testing. So let's give ourselves all the bells and whistles, and it added another stack of gold to all of these. So now we're really... Oh boy. I'm just going to change this to 0. Change this one to 0. Okay. Let's go test 1, test 1. We'll log in and check on see if we fix that issue. Or if it's even adding at all. Because every time we open and close the inventory, what it should be doing is rebuilding it. Oh, come on. Don't hang on the login screen. We're hung on the login screen, which is fantastic. I also don't know why we're hung on the login screen. There we go. Alright, so all of our gear is equipped. We have nothing in our inventory. Let's start unequipping stuff, right? So this should be... It should be adding. It's not. And I think that's because we have to finish our... Oh wow, it didn't even process any of the... It didn't process any of the armory functions, so I think there is a fundamental glitch with this. So we're going to have to now build an armory function as well for our chess pieces. Whew, this is... Man, this is such a complex... I understand now why MMOs are extremely difficult to develop. There's so much that goes into them. You know, I do want to say thank you guys for watching so far. I think I'm going to take a break here and come back to this. I won't say come back to this tomorrow. I'm taking a break from streaming. I'm taking a break from working on this. And I think we'll see, you know, tomorrow, hopefully the armory functions are rebuilt and I can show those off and get the rest of the combat done and loot and all that stuff. There's definitely some issues with this that I'm seeing personally. Like one thing is with the build inventory function, right? Whenever it updates, it's constantly adding in new data to the user inventory, which is problematic. So I think even like for this, we just have to change this to allow null. Okay, and no default value. And then just... I mean, even... I'm just going to empty the table. I'll create an inventory for my dude here. That'll just be empty. And we have to figure out why it's consistently... It's adding children correctly. I'll say that much, but I think we have to save this somehow. And see if a child already exists before adding it. So let's see if there's a way to do that before we end the stream. I'm gonna run a quick break for you guys real quick, and I'll be right back after that. Hmm. All right. Boys, I think I am in a little over my head at the moment. I'm gonna need to take some time to figure this out. So I'm gonna call it for the night or for the day. Probably stream maybe a little bit earlier or later tonight, but I think overall this was a pretty good look at building an MMORPG and getting this data to consistently save outside of save files and on a database so that it can always be called. So from anywhere, any server you run. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm not sure if that actually did anything. Let's double check. Yeah, there we go. I really appreciate the views, and I hope to have something better for you guys tomorrow. Some more done with this. I'm taking a break for now. I'm tired, and yeah, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed watching, and hopefully I can, or sorry, see you guys tonight. Hopefully I'll have some more done, and I can give you guys some more, another more look at the MMORPG. So, thanks guys.